Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine Bengaluru just buzzing, absolutely alive with this
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
The city had just woken up the day after something huge happened. Royal Challengers Bengaluru RCB finally won their first IPL trophy after 18 long years.
Wow, 18 years.
This was June 4th, 2025. The whole city was just ready to burst with celebration.
That feeling, it must have been electric. This incredible wave of just joy, anticipation,
Hmm.
everyone waiting to see their team bring home the cup.
Right. It felt like the end of almost 2 decades of hoping, praying for this win. And there was a plan.
Okay.
A big felicitation ceremony scheduled at the Vidhana Suda, the seat of the state government.
The government builder.
And then the team was supposed to move to Chinnaswamy Stadium for this massive fan meet and greet. On paper, it sounds like the perfect way to celebrate, doesn't it?
It does sound perfect.
Yeah.
Except, well, the reality was anything but. What actually unfolded wasn't a celebration. Not really.
Yeah.
By the end of that day, that planned event at the stadium had turned into this horrific disaster. 11 people dead, over 60 injured, caught in the stampede.
And that's exactly what we need to deep dive into here. How did this go so wrong? How did something meant for pure joy become a scene of such tragedy? Because when you look at the details, it feels less like some unforeseen accident and more.
Well, the phrase used was so predictable it could have been scripted. That's
Yeah.
harsh, but
It is a brutal assessment, yeah. But looking at the pieces, it's really hard to argue against it. This deep dive isn't just about the stampede itself, those terrible moments.
right.
It's about uncovering how political aims seem to override public safety concerns, how crucial warnings from the administration were apparently just dismissed.
And maybe how a focus on corporate visibility, getting the brand out there, played a role in setting the stage for it all.
Exactly, that whole mix. So let's rewind. Back to the planning stage. The big win is June 3rd in Ahmedabad. By the next day, June 4th, back in Bengaluru, this celebration plan is already taking shape. Vidhana Suda first, then the stadium.
Super quick turnaround.
Incredibly quick. But almost immediately, there was a major red flag raised, wasn't there?
There was a big one from the Bengaluru police force.
Okay, what was their issue?
Well, look, they just spent the entire previous night managing the spontaneous celebrations that erupted right after the win.
Ah, right. The city went wild.
Exactly. Streets packed, people everywhere. They were already tired, their resources stretched really thin, and they saw the potential problems with the stadium plan almost immediately.
So what was their specific worry? What did they actually tell the organizers, the state government?
Their warning was clear. Putting everyone, potentially hundreds of thousands of fans, in one single place, like Chinnaswamy Stadium, that was a recipe for chaos.
Yeah.
Especially given the expected turnout and their, already taxed resources. They strongly recommended doing a citywide parade instead. Let the team move through the city, let the fans spread out along the route. It's standard practice for big crowds.
That sounds incredibly sensible, just basic crowd management, right? Disperse the crowd, don't concentrate them. But that advice was rejected. Why?
Apparently, yeah, rejected. The thinking seems to have been that a parade didn't offer the same concentrated visibility. The assessment suggests the organizers, and that includes state government officials, maybe the Cricket Association, the KSCA, they prioritize the photo opportunities.
The photo ops. Seriously.
It seems so. Having politicians, like the Chief Minister Siddaramaiah and the Deputy CM DK Shivakumar, standing shoulder to shoulder with the players at these high-profile single locations. Vidhana Suda, then the stadium.
So the political spotlight, the corporate branding moment, that was seen as more important than the safety advice from the police.
That seems to be the implication from the sources, yeah. Prioritizing that spotlight over the inherent safety of dispersing the crowd.
Wow. That decision, made so early on, feels incredibly significant looking back now.
Absolutely. It really set the tone, didn't it? It framed everything that happened next.
Okay, so the decision's made. Single locations it is.
Mhm.
Fast forward to the morning of June 4th. The city is buzzing. Fans are unbelievably eager, people skipping work, even ditching college exams, apparently, just to be part of this historic moment.
You can imagine the excitement.
Totally. They start gathering at Vidhana Suda first for that initial felicitation.
Right, and that scene of Vidhana Suda, from what we gather, it was this kind of blend. Part government ceremony, part something else.
Like what?
Well, you had the CM and the deputy CM there with the players, yes, a felicitation. But it also felt very much like a political rally mixed with a corporate branding event, using this public moment, this public space, to celebrate a private cricket franchise's victory.
Interesting dynamic. And after that ceremony wrapped up, the focus shifted to the stadium.
Yeah, thousands upon thousands of fans started making their way to Chinnaswamy. The main draw, the big pull, was the promise of free entry.
Free entry. How were they managing that?
Well, this is where things start to really go wrong. RCB's social media was pushing it heavily, telling fans they could get free entry passes through a specific app called Ticket Genie.
Free passes via an app. Okay, I can already see potential problems here.
Precisely. You have this huge flood of people, many, maybe not super tech savvy, all trying to get passes through this one single digital channel, the Ticket Genie app.
Let me guess. It crashed.
Predictably, yeah. Under that kind of massive load, the app just buckled, crashed. And to make things worse, in the area around the stadium, the mobile networks were already struggling with the crowd size, and then they basically failed completely. Too many devices trying to connect.
So the main way to get in is broken. Phones aren't working. Were there any limits placed on these free passes before the app crashed?
Apparently not. No limit seems to have been set on the number of passes the app could issue, which is just mind-boggling.
Okay, this is getting worse.
And then, the final trigger. The crucial announcement that entry was actually free. For everyone, forget the passes have just come in. That announcement only came minutes before the stadium gates were scheduled to open.
Minutes before. So you've got thousands of hyped-up fans, frustrated because the app didn't work, the phones are dead, maybe they've been waiting for hours, and then suddenly it's, just rush the gates, it's free for all. What happened then?
What happened next was just chaos. Absolute chaos on an unimaginable scale. The temporary barricades, the ones meant for crowd control, they just toppled over like dominoes.
Oh, God.
People were surging forward, desperate to get in, climbing over each other.
Okay.
And here's the really critical detail. The police presence at the stadium itself was minimal.
Why? Where were they?
Remember how they were already stretched thin from the night before? And the focus on VIPs? A significant chunk of the available police force was tied up with VIP security back at Vidhanasuda and also managing the team's travel route from the airport to the Taj West End hotel where they were staying.
So the place where the massive crowd was expected was left under-policed.
Exactly. The few officers who were at the stadium were completely overwhelmed by the sheer force of the crowd surge. And eyewitness accounts are really disturbing here. People reported seeing private bouncers, not trained police officers, using lathes, sticks or batons on the crowd.
Private bouncers hitting fans while police were, standing by?
That's what some reports suggest, yes.
Yeah.
We heard accounts, like from Sai Abu Jafar, who said he was hit by bouncers. And another man, Monish Gowda, an engineer, he described falling in that surge right after the free entry call, getting his leg trapped horribly in a broken barricade.
These weren't just crowd control issues. These were people getting hurt, seriously hurt, in the crush.
Terrifying, life-threatening situations. And the timeline makes it even harder to understand. The first deaths were reportedly confirmed around 3:50 p.m. that afternoon.
Okay.
And yet, the chief minister later claimed he wasn't even informed about the tragedy unfolding at the stadium until 5:45 p.m.
Nearly 2 hours later. How is that possible?
It raises serious questions about communication, doesn't it?
Right.
By the end of that day, 11 lives were lost. Most of them young fans, in their 20s, early 30s, died from suffocation in that crush.
It just brings you right back to that initial thought, how could something meant for pure joy end like this?
Because these weren't just numbers on a news report. This was the terrible human cost of all those failures. These were young people. They had lives, families, whole futures ahead of them.
That's what really sticks with you, isn't it? We can analyze the planning failures, the crowd dynamics, but ultimately it's about the individuals who were lost. The sources shared some incredibly painful stories.
Yeah.
Like Chinmay Shetty. She was just 19 years old, an engineering student, but also a talented performer in yakshagana, that traditional folk theater.
Wow, 19.
And the sad twist is she wasn't even a massive cricket fan. Her college apparently sent about 200 students to the event. Her father, K. Karunakar Shetty, he didn't mince words. He called it, flat out, the government's mistake. Oh, that's heartbreaking. And there was Prajwal, too, 23 years old, an engineering graduate who just started a job. He was the sole earner for his family, who lived below the poverty line.
Just starting out.
Yeah. His father, Ganesh, talked about how they were just beginning to feel some hope again, financially, and then this. We were beginning to hope again, he said. Now he's gone. Just devastating.
And Manoj Kumar, 20, a BBA student. He apparently only went because his friends kept insisting, bugging him to go along.
Peer pressure, yeah.
His last chat with his father, Devaraj NT, was about borrowing 200 rupees for the trip, and his father asked this simple, haunting question afterwards: would it have hurt to wait a week for celebrations?
Such a basic, reasonable question. And the answer seems obvious now, doesn't it? These stories just hammer home the scale of the tragedy. These were preventable deaths, young lives full of potential just wiped out because of this cascade of failures.
And almost immediately after the dust settled, or maybe even before, the focus shifts, as it often does, to blame. Who's responsible? The blame game kicked off. It started really quickly, yeah. The immediate response from the government, based on the details we've seen, was to suspend Bengaluru's police commissioner, B. Dayananda.
The top cop.
Him, plus 4 other senior officers, including the intelligence chief, and the chief minister also fired his own political secretary.
Suspending the police leadership. Okay, on the surface, that might look like decisive action, like accountability. But hang on. Didn't we just say the police warned them about the single location plan?
Exactly. That's the contradiction that jumped out to many observers and critics cited in the sources. It felt very much like scapegoating.
Punishing the ones who raised the alarm.
It looked that way. The police had given the warning, their advice was ignored, and yet they were the first ones facing suspension. Meanwhile, the top organizers, the government officials who actually made those key planning decisions, they seemed, at least initially, to be shielded from direct consequences.
That raises huge questions about where the real responsibility lies, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The Indian Police Foundation actually spoke out quite strongly. They called foul, urged the officers to be reinstated, and demanded a proper, fair review that looked at the shared responsibility, including the KSCA, the State Cricket Association, RCB itself, and the state officials involved in the planning.
What about the KSCA? The Cricket Association, they hosted the event at their stadium. Did they do anything?
Well, their secretary and treasurer did resign. They issued statements saying they were taking moral responsibility.
Moral responsibility after the fact.
Right. For some critics, it felt a bit like closing the stable door after the horse had bolted, resigning after the disaster, rather than demonstrating proactive accountability beforehand.
And the chief minister, Siddaramaiah, how did he respond personally to the growing criticism and the tragedy itself?
He seemed to try to distance himself specifically from the stadium part of the event. He reportedly said he had no connection to what happened there at Chinnaswamy, claimed he only attended the Vidhana Suda part because the KSCA invited him.
Trying to separate the two events.
Yes. And he also accused the opposition party, the BJP, of politicizing the tragedy for their own gain.
Which, you can probably guess, brought a sharp response from the BJP.
Oh, absolutely. The BJP labeled the whole thing criminal negligence. They called for both the chief minister and the deputy chief minister to resign immediately. Their message on social media on X was blunt. No basic arrangements, just chaos. It shows the political heat for sure, but it also tapped into that public anger over the clear lack of preparation.
And RCB. The team, everyone was there to celebrate. What was their response?
RCB put out a statement expressing sadness, condolences, but they faced criticism too. Given their massive, passionate fan base, many felt they should have known better. They should have anticipated the sheer scale of the turnout and worked much more closely, more effectively with the authorities on the planning side.
It wasn't just any event. It was their victory celebration.
Exactly. And interestingly, the BCCI secretary, Devajit Saikia, offered a comparison. He noted that previous IPL victory celebrations, like the one for Chennai Super Kings the year before, had shown proper coordination between the team, the association, and the authorities. That coordination, he implied, was visibly lacking here in Bengaluru.
So it's this tangled web, isn't it? Rushed decisions, ignored warnings, poor execution on the ground, and then a whole lot of finger-pointing afterwards. But this event, as horrific as it is, feels like it's more than just a one-off failure. It feels like a symptom of something bigger going on in Bengaluru.
It absolutely does. I think that's a crucial point. This wasn't just an isolated incident born purely out of cricket excitement. It connects directly to Bengaluru's ongoing, very real struggles with basic urban management and governance.
Yeah, the city's image is so often about being India's Silicon Valley, right? High-tech, forward-thinking, innovation hub. But then you dig a little deeper and you see reports about fundamental infrastructure problems.
Exactly. It's this jarring contrast. We see data suggesting that over 70% of Indian cities, and Bengaluru is included here, lack proper sewage and garbage disposal systems. Think about that.
Basic sanitation.
Basic sanitation. The Vrishabhawati River, which used to be a vital waterway for the city, is now reportedly something like 80% untreated sewage.
That's appalling.
And the lakes. Bengaluru was famous for its lakes. crucial for groundwater, for flood control. They've reportedly gone from around 800 historically down to just 17 today, many just paved over for real estate.
And we saw the direct tragic consequences of that lack of infrastructure just before the Stampede, didn't we? With the monsoon floods in May 2025.
Horrific consequences. Streets literally turned into rivers. People drowned in their own city.
Yeah.
A young boy died falling into an open manhole. Laborers were killed when a poorly constructed wall collapsed under the rain. The city's infrastructure is just buckling. It can't cope with the rapid, often unplanned growth.
Even something as everyday as traffic, which is notoriously bad in Bengaluru anyway.
It was amplified massively on the day of the Stampede. The focus on the VIP routes and the sheer number of people converging caused gridlock for miles, from Vidhanasuda down towards MG Road. Metro stations even had to shut down temporarily, leaving people stranded, having to walk huge distances.
There was even that attempt to reform the city's governance structure, right? That Greater Bengaluru Governance Bill from 2024 aimed at splitting the BBMP, the municipal corporation, to make it more manageable.
That's right. The bill was meant to improve administration, make it more efficient. But the governor sent it back, asking for wider public consultation first.
Which feels relevant here, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like another example where big top-down decisions, whether it's restructuring the city or planning a massive celebration, seem to bypass the necessary groundwork, the consultation, the expert input needed for complex urban challenges. There was even an IIT Bombay study in 2025 comparing Mumbai's old drainage system to Bengaluru's, and finding Bengaluru wasn't much better, treating only about 30% of its sewage.
So when we look at the Stampede, it's not just about that one day, that one event. It's like a magnifying glass held up to these deeper systemic cracks in the city's foundation, its infrastructure, its governance, its planning processes.
That's exactly it. The Stampede tragically highlighted how fragile the whole system becomes when those basic foundations, planning, infrastructure, listening to warnings, aren't properly prioritized.
Okay, let's try and pull this together. Based on everything we've discussed, if you had to list the absolute core failures that came together to create this disaster, what would they be?
All right, let's boil it down. First, undeniably, the hasty planning. Trying to organize an event of this magnitude with potentially hundreds of thousands attending in less than 24 hours, that was just asking for trouble. Reckless.
Second, clearly ignoring the warnings. The Bengaluru police explicitly flagged the dangers of the single-location event at the stadium. They suggested the parade. That expert advice was overruled.
Crucial point. Then number 3, the profoundly poor crowd management at the stadium itself. Relying on a tech solution, the Ticket Genie app, that predictably failed under pressure.
No limits on numbers.
Right, no apparent limit on attendees. The dangerously late announcement of free-for-all entry. The insufficient police presence on the ground. And then relying on private bouncers who reportedly used excessive force instead of trained crowd control. It was just failure upon failure upon failure.
And connected to the police numbers, that fourth point, the VIP focus. Diverting so many police resources away from the main public event at the stadium to secure politicians and the team's route, that left the critical zone dangerously understaffed right when the surge happened.
Absolutely. And finally, number 5, the initial response regarding accountability felt deeply problematic. Suspending police officers who had actually issued warnings, while the organizers and top officials who made the key decisions seemed to avoid immediate consequences. That sent a really confusing and troubling message about who was truly responsible.
So, looking forward then, after a tragedy like this, can the city actually learn? Is there a path forward suggested by the sources, by the analysis?
There is a path, but it requires some pretty fundamental shifts in approach, I think. First, it means genuinely listening to the experts.
Like the police warnings.
Exactly. Like the police, like urban planners, like engineers, when they flag safety risks or point out infrastructure deficits. Taking that advice seriously, not dismissing it for political expediency or optics.
It also surely means planning ahead properly.
Definitely. Giving adequate notice, time, and resources for large public events. Not treating public safety measures like barriers, police deployment, entry management as some kind of last-minute add-on after the main show plan is set. It has to be integral from the start.
And beyond event planning, that deeper issue of infrastructure.
That requires serious, sustained investment. Fixing the drainage systems, working to revive the lost lakes, supporting initiatives that manage urban growth more sustainably, like the BBMP's Bayastadanathi Bialu program for public spaces. It can't just be about the next big tech park or flyover. The basics need fixing.
And accountability needs to be real, right? Not just symbolic gestures.
Absolutely critical.
Hmm.
There's that magisterial probe going on, led by Deputy Commissioner Jagadi Hajji, expected to retort soon. The real test will be whether that probe actually names names, identifies the specific individuals and agencies responsible for the specific failures that led to the deaths, not just another report talking about vague systemic issues.
People need to be held responsible for their decisions, or lack thereof.
Precisely. And finally, maybe just learning from what works. The BCCI official pointed out that last year's IPL celebrations were well coordinated. The knowledge exists, the capacity is there. It's about actually applying those lessons consistently and making safety the absolute top priority, always.
This deep dive into the Bengaluru Stampede, it just leaves you with such a heavy feeling. 11 lives. Gone. And it wasn't a flood or an earthquake, it was a tragedy born of human decisions, wasn't it? Or maybe the failure to make the right ones.
It really feels like it came from this toxic mix of, well, overlooking clear warnings, prioritizing appearances and photo ops, and just a fundamental lack of realistic planning for managing huge crowds in a city already under strain.
And the families who lost their loved ones, the survivors who went through that terror, they deserve so much more than just statements of condolence, don't they?
They deserve a city and leaders who genuinely prioritize their safety going forward. Actions, not just words.
You know, for a city that prides itself on being India's tech capital, a global hub dreaming of smart cities, even Mars missions, this deep dive really makes you pause. It makes you wonder. Maybe the first and most crucial smart plan Bengaluru needs right now is just figuring out how to safely manage a cricket parade.
It brings things back down to earth, doesn't it? Get the basics right first.